Admiral Marcus Torres stood at the bridge of the UES Valiant, watching the unfamiliar vessel limp through space before them. Its crystalline hull pulsed with failing energy signatures, and debris trailed in its wake like autumn leaves scattered in the wind. The ship was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered in their decades of space exploration. "Life signs are stable but declining," Lieutenant Emma Rodriguez reported from her station. "Their power core is reaching critical levels. Sir, if we don't act now." Torres didn't need her to finish the thought. He'd spent 20 years in the United Earth Navy making the tough calls, but this one was different. This wasn't a human vessel in distress, this was first contact, happening in the worst possible way. "Initiate emergency docking procedures," Torres commanded. "Alert medical to prepare for possible xenobiological containment, and get Dr. Rivera up here immediately." The bridge crew moved with practiced efficiency, but Torres could sense their tension. Humanity had dreamed of first contact for centuries, but not like this. Not with a dying ship in the outer reaches of the Sol system. The alien vessel's hull seemed to ripple as the Valiant's docking clamps engaged. Dr. Kai Rivera, Earth's leading xenobiologist, arrived on the bridge just as the airlock sensors began their synchronization sequence. "Admiral," Rivera said, his dark eyes gleaming with barely contained excitement despite the gravity of the situation. "Initial scans suggest their atmospheric requirements are remarkably similar to ours." "The odds of that are..." "Save the statistics for later, Doctor," Torres interrupted. "Can we safely bring them aboard?" Rivera nodded. "Yes, but we should maintain Level 2 containment protocols, just in case." The rescue operation moved swiftly. As the survivors were brought aboard, Torres found himself face to face with beings that would forever change humanity's destiny. The Meridians, as they called themselves, were humanoid but clearly alien. Their skin had a subtle iridescent quality, and their eyes held an inner light that seemed to shift with their emotions. Their leader, Commander Lyra, was barely conscious when they brought her to the medical bay. "The Vex," she whispered, her translator struggling with the alien word. "They follow. You must run." Torres had no intention of running. Humanity had spent too long preparing for this moment, and he wouldn't abandon these beings to whatever fate pursued them. "You're under the protection of Earth now," he assured her. "Rest." But Lyra's warning proved prophetic. Within hours, the Valiant's long-range sensors detected multiple ships dropping out of faster-than-light travel. Their design was angular, predatory, completely different from the organic curves of the Meridian vessel. "Multiple weapon signatures detected," Rodriguez announced, her voice steady despite the circumstances. "They're charging weapon systems, Admiral." Torres studied the tactical display, his mind racing through options. The Valiant was the most advanced ship in Earth's fleet, but they'd never faced alien weapons before. They had no idea what these new arrivals were capable of. "Open a channel," he ordered. The response came in the form of a barrage of energy weapons that rocked the Valiant. The Vex, it seemed, weren't interested in diplomacy. "Shields holding at 80%, Rodriguez reported. "Their weapons are powerful, but our defensive systems are adapting." Torres allowed himself a grim smile. If these Vex thought humanity would be easy prey, they were in for a surprise. "Battle stations. Show them how Earth welcomes uninvited guests. Launch our Phantom squadrons and prepare the main gun." The space around the Valiant erupted into chaos as Earth's first interstellar battle began. The ship's AI-assisted defense systems learned and adapted with each hit, while their quantum-enhanced weapons proved more than a match for the Vex shields. In the medical bay, Lyra watched the battle unfold on a monitoring screen, her expression a mixture of hope and disbelief. These humans, these newcomers to the galactic stage, were holding their own against warriors that had terrorized her people for generations. The battle ended as suddenly as it began. The Vex ships, clearly not expecting such fierce resistance, retreated into FTL, leaving behind only debris and questions. Torres ordered his crew to maintain battle stations. He doubted this would be their last encounter with the Vex. Why? Lyra asked him later, when she had recovered enough to speak. Why would you risk everything to help us? To fight them? Torres looked out at the stars through the medical bay's viewport. Because that's what humanity does. We explore, we help, we fight if we must. And now that we know what's out there. He turned back to her, his expression determined. Your fight is our fight now. Lyra's inner light flickered with emotion. You don't understand what you're committing to. The Vex have destroyed civilizations far more advanced than yours. Perhaps, Torres agreed. But they've never faced humanity before. As the Valiant set course for Earth, carrying its alien refugees and news that would forever change human history, Torres knew that this was just the beginning. Humanity had dreamed of reaching the stars, but they'd never imagined they'd have to fight for their place among them. Yet as he looked at his crew, at the determination in their eyes and the pride in their bearing, he knew they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The stars were no longer just points of light in humanity's sky. They were a battlefield, a frontier, and a promise. And humanity would face them all with the same spirit that had taken them from cave paintings to the cosmos, with courage, compassion, and an unwavering determination to forge their own destiny among the stars. The massive holographic display in the United Earth Defense Command Center cast an eerie blue glow across the faces of assembled military and scientific leaders. Admiral Torres stood beside Dr. Rivera as they presented their findings to the Emergency Council. 3 months had passed since humanity's first contact with the Meridians, and the situation had only grown more complex. The Vex aren't just warriors, Rivera explained, manipulating the hologram to show microscopic images. They're bioengineers of unprecedented skill. Each attack carries a new variant of their synthetic plague. They're not just trying to defeat the Meridians, they're trying to rewrite their genetic code. Colonel Maya Patel, newly appointed head of Earth's Xenological Defense Division, leaned forward. And you believe they'll try the same approach with humans? They already have, Torres responded, nodding to Rivera to show the next image. The attack on the lunar colony last week wasn't just a standard assault. They were testing us, seeing how our biology responds to their weapons. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Vex had struck 3 human outposts in the past month, each attack more sophisticated than the last. But it was their biological weapons that posed the greatest threat, weapons that could potentially reshape or destroy humanity itself. We have an advantage they didn't expect, Rivera continued, his voice carrying a note of excitement despite the grave situation. Human genetic diversity. We're far more varied than the Meridians, making it harder for them to create a pathogen that affects all of us equally. More importantly, our immune systems are remarkably adaptable. In the months since first contact, Rivera had worked closely with Meridian scientists, particularly their chief geneticist, Vena, who now stood at his side. Her iridescent skin shimmed slightly as she addressed the council. Your species' medical technology, while less advanced than ours in many ways, takes a completely different approach to biological threats, she explained. We focused on perfection, on creating impenetrable defenses. You focused on adaptation, on learning from each attack. Together, we might have a solution. Torres watched as understanding dawned on the council members' faces. Humanity's greatest strength had always been its ability to adapt, to learn, to turn adversity into advantage. Now that strength might save 2 species. The next few weeks saw an unprecedented collaboration between human and Meridian scientists. Rivera and Vena led a joint team in developing what they called the Phoenix Protocol, a revolutionary medical defense system that combined Meridian biotechnology with human immunological principles. But the Vex wouldn't wait for them to perfect their defenses. The attack came during the 3rd week of testing, striking simultaneously at Earth's major population centers. Millions fell ill as an engineered virus swept through cities and settlements. In the quarantine zone of New Shanghai, Rivera worked tirelessly alongside his team, watching as the virus evolved, learning its patterns. "It's beautiful, in a terrifying way," he told Venna as they studied the latest samples. "The Vex think like engineers, trying to build the perfect weapon. But life isn't about perfection, it's about evolution." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Lieutenant Rodriguez, who had transferred from the Valiant to assist with data analysis, noticed a pattern in the virus's behavior. "It's not random," she explained, pointing to her findings. "The virus is following a predictable mathematical sequence. If we can disrupt that sequence." The Phoenix protocol was deployed globally within hours of testing. It wasn't a cure, it was something better. It was an adaptive defense system that turned the Vex's own bioengineering principles against them. Human immune systems, enhanced by Meridian biotechnology, learned to predict and counter the virus's mutations before they could take effect. The Vex weapon became humanity's shield. "They'll adapt," Venna warned as they watched the infection rates plummet. "The Vex always adapt." "So will we," Torres replied. "That's what humans do best." But victory against the virus was just the beginning. As Earth's defenses grew stronger, the Vex attacks became more desperate, more direct. Ships appeared in orbit, launching conventional attacks against major cities. Yet each assault revealed more about their tactics, their technology, their weaknesses. In the command center, Torres studied reports from the latest battle. Human ships, now equipped with hybrid technology that merged Earth's quantum weapons with Meridian shield systems, were more than holding their own. The Vex's apparent invincibility was proving to be an illusion. "They've never faced an enemy like us," Colonel Patel observed, standing beside him. "An enemy that gets stronger with every attack." "That's what they don't understand about humans," Torres agreed. "We don't just survive, we learn, we adapt, we grow stronger. And now we're teaching the Meridians to do the same." As if to emphasize his point, a report came in from the Jupiter Defense Perimeter. A Vex assault fleet had been repelled by a joint human-Meridian task force, with minimal casualties on their side. The balance of power was shifting. In her laboratory, Venna watched human children playing in a park through a viewport, their laughter carrying even through the reinforced glass. "Your people continue to amaze me," she told Rivera. "In the face of such danger, they still find joy, still move forward." Rivera smiled, understanding what she meant. Despite the war, despite the threat hanging over them, humanity refused to be paralyzed by fear. They adapted, they innovated, they lived. "That's another thing the Vex don't understand," he said. "They think victory is about destroying your enemy. But sometimes, victory is about becoming something stronger than you were before. Together, our people are becoming something new, something neither of us could have become alone." As the sun set over the recovery zones, casting long shadows across cities that had so recently faced extinction, humanity looked to the stars with new purpose. The Vex had meant to break them, to reshape them according to their design. Instead, they had forced humanity to evolve, to reach their full potential. The war was far from over, but its nature had changed. What had begun as a desperate fight for survival had become a forge, tempering two civilizations into something stronger, more resilient, more united than either had been before. And in the depths of space, the Vex watched, recalculated, and for the first time in their long history of conquest, knew fear. Operation Lightbringer began in darkness. Across the void of space, a combined fleet of human and Meridian warships gathered at the edge of the Arcturus sector. Admiral Torres watched from the bridge of the newly commissioned UES Prometheus as the final ships took their positions. The vessel represented the peak of human-Meridian cooperation, Earth's quantum weaponry merged with Meridian crystal tech engineering. "All battle groups report ready," Lieutenant Rodriguez announced from her tactical station. She'd earned her promotion after the new Shanghai crisis, and Torres couldn't think of anyone he'd rather have managing the complex dance of ships about to unfold. "The Vex won't expect us to strike directly at their supply lines," Colonel Patel said, her holographic image flickering slightly in the ship's tactical display. She commanded Battle Group Echo from the UES Hyperion, positioned on the fleet's opposite flank. "Their arrogance will be their undoing." The intelligence had come from deep-cover Meridian scouts. The Vex maintained a massive logistics hub in the Arcturus sector, feeding their war machine across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. It was heavily defended, but not impregnable, especially to an enemy they'd consistently underestimated. "Begin Phase 1, Torres ordered. Launch the Phantom squadrons." Across the fleet, launch bays opened silently in the vacuum of space. The Phantoms, next-generation stealth fighters developed by Earth's best engineers, slipped out like shadows among the stars. Their hybrid drives, combining human fusion technology with Meridian quantum fields, left no energy signature for Vex sensors to detect. Commander Jack Chen led the Phantom assault from the cockpit of his fighter. "Remember the simulations," he told his pilots through the tactical net. "The Vex rely on predictive algorithms for their automated defenses. Our job is to be unpredictable." The fighters approached the first line of Vex defensive platforms. Massive automated sentinels hung in space, their sensors sweeping for threats. But the Phantoms, cloaked in fields that bent both light and gravity, slipped through blind spots that human intuition had discovered in Vex defensive patterns. "They're so focused on efficiency," Chen had explained during mission planning, "that they create predictable gaps. A human pilot can see them, feel them, but their AIs never account for them." The first explosion took the Vex completely by surprise. Chen's squadron hit 3 defense platforms simultaneously, their quantum torpedoes phasing through outer shields to detonate at the structure's cores. As secondary explosions bloomed in space, the rest of the Phantom squadrons struck their targets. "Phase 1 complete," Rodriguez reported. "Vex defensive grid is down to 60% capacity and falling." Torres nodded grimly. "Signal battle groups Delta and Echo. Begin Phase 2. The main fleet moved forward, emerging from the sensor shadow of a nearby nebula. But instead of forming a traditional battle line, the ships broke into smaller, irregular groups. It was a tactic that had emerged from countless simulations and skirmishes. The Vex excelled at targeting large formations, but their targeting systems struggled with multiple independent groups moving in seemingly random patterns. "Multiple Vex capital ships emerging from hyperspace," Rodriguez announced. "They're attempting to form a containment pattern." "Let them try," Torres replied. "Colonel Patel, you have tactical freedom." Battle Group Echo suddenly accelerated, its ships performing a maneuver that would have torn apart vessels using conventional drives. The Meridian crystal tech allowed them to pull gravitational forces that would have crushed ordinary crews. The Vex ships, attempting to predict their trajectory, fired on where Echo should have been, but Patel's group was already elsewhere, their quantum weapons tearing into the Vex fleet's exposed flanks. In the midst of the chaos, Rivera and Vena monitored the battle from the Prometheus's science lab. They weren't just observing, they were gathering crucial data on Vex response patterns, feeding it into the fleet's tactical networks. "Their adaptations are becoming more erratic," Vena noted, her inner light pulsing with excitement. "They cannot predict what they cannot understand." Rivera smiled. "And they'll never understand humanity's controlled chaos. We thrive on it." The battle reached its crescendo as the combined fleet pushed through to the logistics hub itself. The massive structure, a city-sized complex of automated factories and supply depots, bristled with defensive weapons. But its defenders were in disarray, their carefully planned responses thrown into chaos by human tactical unpredictability. "All ships, execute Maneuver Omega," Torres commanded. It was a complex dance of ships, fighters, and weapon systems, each element moving independently yet part of a greater whole. Like jazz musicians improvising around a central theme, each commander added their own variations while maintaining the overall strategy. The Vex, for all their technological superiority, had no defense against such organized chaos. Their defensive fire became increasingly desperate, increasingly ineffective. One by one, their automated systems failed, their ships fell back in disarray. "Hub defenses are collapsing," Rodriguez reported. "We're receiving surrender signals from the remaining Vex vessels." A cheer went up across the bridge, quickly echoed throughout the fleet. But Torres kept his focus on the tactical display. This victory, while significant, was just one battle in a longer war. "Begin recovery operations," he ordered. "I want every piece of Vex technology catalogued and analyzed. Their supply chain may be disrupted, but they'll adapt. We need to be ready." Later, as salvage teams swarmed through the captured hub, Torres stood with Patel and Chen in the Prometheus's observation deck, watching the cleanup operation. "The Vex made a fundamental mistake," Patel observed. "They saw our technological limitations and assumed we were inferior. They never understood that technology isn't everything." Chen nodded. "Humanity's greatest weapon has always been our ability to think differently, to find solutions where others see only problems. And now we've taught the Meridians to do the same," Torres added, watching a joint human Meridian engineering team tackle a particularly challenging piece of salvage. Where the Meridians once would have approached the problem with methodical precision, they now incorporated human intuition and improvisation. The victory at Arcturus marked a turning point in the war. The Vex aura of invincibility was shattered, their supply lines disrupted, their confidence shaken. But more importantly, it proved that humanity's place among the stars wouldn't be determined by the level of their technology, but by the strength of their spirit and the power of their innovation. As the fleet prepared to return home, Torres received a message from Earth Command. More Vex activity had been detected, this time closer to human space. The war was far from over, but humanity was ready. They had found their stride, their strength, their way of fighting. The stars themselves seemed to shine brighter as the fleet set course for home, carrying with them not just the spoils of victory, but the promise of more victories to come. The Vex had awakened a sleeping giant, and now they would face the consequences of their arrogance. The warning came from the most unlikely source, a maintenance worker at the Lunar Gateway Station. James Cooper had been checking atmospheric recyclers when he noticed something odd about the crystalline components recently installed by the Vex prisoners who had surrendered after the Arcturus campaign. The crystals weren't just filtering air, they were changing it, subtly altering its composition in ways that defied normal physics. Within hours, Colonel Patel's counterintelligence team descended on the station. What they found sent shockwaves through the United Earth Defense Command. The crystals were part of a vast network of biological transmitters, spreading across every facility where captured Vex technology had been installed. "It's brilliant in its simplicity," Dr. Rivera explained to the Emergency Council meeting. His usual enthusiasm was tempered by grim concern. "The crystals emit trace particles that, when inhaled over time, make human tissue more susceptible to Vex bioweapons. They've been preparing us for a massive attack." Admiral Torres studied the holographic map showing affected installations. Red dots speckled across Earth, Luna, and Mars, everywhere they'd eagerly implemented, salvaged Vex technology. "How did we miss this?" "Because we were looking for obvious threats," Venna replied, her inner light pulsing with distress. "The Vex knew we would examine their technology for weapons or surveillance devices. This." She gestured at the display, "This is far more insidious." Lieutenant Rodriguez, who had been analyzing communication patterns across the affected stations, spoke up. "Sir, we're detecting unusual quantum signatures from the crystal networks. They're building to some kind of crescendo." "How long?" Torres demanded. "Based on the energy patterns, 72 hours at most." The room erupted in urgent discussion. Evacuating every affected facility was impossible in that time frame. Simply destroying the crystals might trigger an immediate reaction. They needed a solution, and they needed it fast. Commander Chen, freshly returned from a Phantom Squadron patrol, offered an unexpected perspective. What if we don't fight the network? What if we use it? All eyes turned to him as he continued, the Vex think like engineers, right? They built this network to transmit their bioweapon. But any network can be hacked, reprogrammed. Rivera's eyes lit up with understanding. We could turn their own transmission system against them. But we'd need to understand exactly how their quantum crystal technology works, and quickly. I might be able to help with that. A new voice joined the conversation. Dr. Aisha Khan, Earth's leading quantum physicist, had been quietly studying the Vex crystals since their first capture. The crystals don't just transmit energy, they transmit information. They're like quantum computers, but organic. If we can change the base programming. The next 48 hours became a desperate race against time. While Patel's teams worked to identify and contain Vex infiltrators who had been hiding among the surrendered prisoners, the science team labored to crack the crystal network's quantum code. The breakthrough came from an unexpected collaboration. Khan's quantum mechanics expertise, combined with Rivera's understanding of Vex biology and Vena's knowledge of crystalline technology, revealed the network's fundamental architecture. The Vex hadn't built a simple transmission system. They'd created a vast quantum computer, using human facilities as nodes in their calculation. They're not just planning to attack us, Khan explained, her voice tight with urgency. They're using our own infrastructure to calculate the perfect bioweapon, one that could wipe out both humans and Meridians in a single stroke. But their discovery came with an opportunity. The quantum nature of the network meant it could be influenced by observation. Human consciousness, properly focused through the crystal matrix, could actually alter its fundamental programming. The Vex never considered this possibility, Vena realized. In all their calculations, they never accounted for the power of conscious intention. Torres looked skeptical. You're saying we can stop this attack, by thinking at it? Not exactly, Khan corrected. But we can use the quantum entanglement principles that govern human consciousness to introduce uncertainty into their calculations. We can corrupt their perfect weapon by making it impossible to predict its final form. The plan they devised was audacious. Using modified meridian meditation techniques, amplified through Khan's quantum interference devices, they would deploy teams of human and meridian volunteers at key nodes in the crystal network. Their focused consciousness would introduce quantum uncertainty into the system, corrupting the Vex's careful calculations. As the deadline approached, Torres stood in the control center of Luna Base, watching as teams took their positions across the solar system. Everything hinged on precise timing and coordination. The Vex would detect their interference eventually, but by then, it would be too late. All teams report ready, Rodriguez announced. Crystal network is approaching critical threshold. Torres took a deep breath. Begin Operation Quantum Mind. Across human space, volunteers connected to the crystal network through Khan's devices. Their minds, trained in the basic principles of quantum observation, began to introduce uncertainty into the Vex calculations. The crystal network, designed to compute the perfect bioweapon, instead became a maze of quantum possibilities. The effect was immediate and dramatic. The crystal matrices began to pulse with chaotic energy as their perfectly ordered calculations dissolved into quantum uncertainty. In orbit, Vex ships that had been waiting to receive the completed weapon calculations suddenly found their transmissions corrupted beyond recovery. It's working, Khan reported, monitoring the quantum fluctuations. The network is cascading into quantum chaos. Their weapon calculations are corrupting exponentially. But the Vex weren't finished. As their careful plans unraveled, they launched a desperate attack on key human installations. Sleeper agents, hidden among the surrendered prisoners, activated emergency protocols. Multiple breaches detected, Rodriguez called out. They're trying to physically seize control of the crystal nodes. Torres had been prepared for this possibility. Launch Defense Protocol Sierra. Let's show them why attacking humanity on our own ground is a bad idea. Security teams, already positioned near critical installations, moved with precise coordination. The Vex agents found themselves facing not just armed resistance, but clever traps and defensive systems specifically designed to counter their technology. In the end, it wasn't even close. The Vex, so reliant on their predictive algorithms and perfect calculations, couldn't adapt to the chaos of close-quarters combat with determined human defenders. Within hours, the last infiltrators were captured or neutralized. As the crystal network collapsed, its quantum energy harmlessly dissipating into space, Torres met with his team in the Luna Base conference room. The victory felt different from their triumph at Arcturus, less explosive, perhaps, but no less significant. The Vex will try again, Patel warned. They'll learn from this failure. Let them learn, Rivera replied. Each time they fail, they're learning the same lesson: humanity isn't just another species to be calculated and conquered. We're something they've never encountered before, a variable they can't predict. Looking out at Earth hanging in the lunar sky, Torres couldn't help but smile. The Vex had tried to use humanity's own infrastructure against them, but in doing so, they'd revealed something profound about the human spirit. In their quest for perfection, they'd forgotten that imperfection, uncertainty, chaos, free will, could be the greatest strength of all. The Vex homeworld hung in space like a mechanical jewel, its surface a lattice of crystalline structures and quantum processors stretching from pole to pole. After years of war, countless battles, and the combined intelligence efforts of two civilizations, humanity in the Meridians had finally found it, hidden in a pocket of warped spacetime that the Vex had engineered to be virtually undetectable. Admiral Torres stood on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, now upgraded with technology that would have seemed like magic just a few years ago. The combined fleet of human and Meridian ships around him represented the largest peaceful cooperation between two species in known galactic history. Final fleet positioning complete, Lieutenant Rodriguez reported. All ships report ready for the dimensional shift. Dr. Khan's latest breakthrough had made this moment possible. By studying the quantum signatures of captured Vex technology, she had discovered how to pierce their dimensional hiding place. But getting there was only the first challenge. The Vex have had millennia to fortify this system, Colonel Patel reminded them during the final briefing. They've never needed to defend it before, no one's ever found them. But they've prepared for the possibility. The first wave of defensive measures proved her right. As the fleet began its dimensional shift, automated platforms emerged from concealed positions throughout the system. But humanity had learned much since their first encounters with Vex technology. Deploy the quantum scramblers, Torres ordered. Devices developed by the Joint Human Meridian Science Team activated across the fleet. Based on the principles they discovered during the Crystal Network crisis, they projected fields of quantum uncertainty that played havoc with Vex targeting systems. Commander Chen's Phantom Squadron struck next, using attack patterns that seemed random but followed complex mathematical principles derived from chaos theory. The Vex defenses, designed to counter logical and predictable threats, struggled to adapt. Multiple Vex capital ships emerging, Rodriguez announced. They're forming a defensive sphere around the planet. Just as we expected, Torres replied. Begin Phase 2. This close to the source of Vex power, their technology should have been at its strongest. Instead, they faced an enemy that had spent years learning their weaknesses, developing counters to their every advantage. Human unpredictability combined with Meridian precision in ways the Vex had never imagined possible. In his laboratory aboard the Prometheus, Dr. Rivera worked with Vena and a team of xenobiologists on the final stage of their plan. The Vex weren't just a technological species, they were a biological one that had merged with their machines. That was their greatest strength, but it could also be their vulnerability. The sequencing is complete, Rivera announced over the command channel. The retrovirus is ready. It had taken years of study, countless simulations, and the combined genetic expertise of two species to develop. Not a weapon of destruction, but a key to transformation. The virus wouldn't destroy the Vex, it would give them something they'd lost millennia ago, the ability to evolve, to change, to grow beyond their rigid patterns. Multiple impacts on our forward shields, Rodriguez reported as another wave of Vex weapons fire splashed against the fleet's defenses. They're adapting to our quantum interference. They always do, Torres replied calmly. That's why we have 300 more variations ready to deploy. Launch the delivery platforms. Specially designed missiles shot forth from the fleet's ships, their payloads protected by multiple layers of deception and defense. The Vex, expecting weapons, focused their efforts on destroying them. They didn't realize that even the destroyed platforms served a purpose, releasing clouds of microscopic delivery vehicles that drifted toward the planet's atmosphere. Sir, Rodriguez called out, we're detecting massive energy buildups on the surface. They're activating some kind of planetary defense system. The surface of the Vex homeworld began to glow as energy collectors the size of continents powered up. But the humans and Meridians had planned for this too. Now, Dr. Khan, Torres ordered. Across the fleet, quantum resonators of Khan's design activated. They didn't try to overpower the Vex weapons, instead, they created a complex interference pattern that turned the planet's own defense grid into a delivery system for the retrovirus. Atmospheric penetration confirmed, Rivera reported excitedly. The virus is spreading through their biological-mechanical matrix. The effect wasn't immediate, this was no simple weapon of mass destruction. Instead, over the next several hours, the combined fleet held its position, defending against increasingly erratic Vex attacks as the retrovirus began its work. The first sign of success came when a Vex ship suddenly ceased fire, its quantum signatures shifting into patterns never before seen. Then another, and another. On the surface, the rigid crystalline structures began to shift, taking on new forms that merged the mechanical precision of the Vex with organic fluidity. They're evolving, Vena whispered, watching the transformation through the lab's sensors. For the first time in their history, they're truly changing. The Vex had spent millennia pursuing perfection through rigid control and calculation. In doing so, they had trapped themselves in patterns that allowed for no growth, no adaptation, no true evolution. The retrovirus broke those patterns, allowing them to experience change not as a threat to be eliminated, but as an opportunity for growth. Hours turned to days as the transformation spread across the Vex civilization. The fighting stopped not through force of arms, but through a fundamental shift in the Vex themselves. Their ships stood down, their weapons powered down, and finally, they began to communicate. Not with threats or demands, but with questions. For the first time in their long history, they wanted to learn rather than control. In the aftermath, as diplomatic channels opened and the first peaceful exchanges began, Torres stood with his team in the Prometheus's observation deck, watching the transformed Vex world below. Was it really this simple? Patel wondered. All this time, all we needed to do was help them change. Simple? Rivera laughed. It took two species working together, countless battles, and innovations in everything from quantum physics to xenobiology to reach this point. But yes, in the end, we didn't beat the Vex, we helped them evolve. That's always been humanity's greatest strength, Torres reflected. Not our technology, not our weapons, but our ability to adapt, to change, and to help others do the same. We didn't just survive first contact, we helped create something entirely new. As ships from Earth, Meridian worlds, and now the transformed Vex civilization began the long process of establishing peaceful relations, the stars themselves seemed to shine with new possibility. Humanity had proven itself not just as warriors or survivors, but as agents of positive change in a vast and complex galaxy. The war was over, but humanity's journey among the stars was just beginning. They had learned that their greatest strength lay not in fighting alone, but in bringing hope, change, and the chance for evolution to all they encountered. As the Prometheus set course for Earth, carrying news of their victory, Torres knew that this was more than just the end of a war. It was the dawn of a new era, one where humanity's unique gifts would help shape the very future of galactic civilization.